So today, Joburg on a Plate is all about celebrating real South African pioneers who are changing the national landscape through food. So we're going to hear from Zeenat Simjee, who is the history-making dietitian who literally fed the national team to World Cup victory for rugby in 2019. And then we hear from Mokgadi Mabela, a third-generation beekeeper and the pioneering founder of Native Nossi honey production and beekeeping company. And since we'll be really hungry by then, we've got a delicious Joburg-inspired quiche demo by culinary creative Sinesipho Baduza. And finally, because there's always room for dessert, we're going to end with the incredible story of Davy Tsopo from Keki by Davy. As usual, guys, we're keeping things nice and interactive. Remember, you can always type in your comments and questions in the chat as we go along. So I only lived in Joburg for just under a year, but Zeenat, you're a Joburg native. Describe your journey joining the Springboks leading into the World Cup.
Well, Lucia, I'm actually born in Joburg and relocated to Cape Town for my job as the national team's dietitian at SA Rugby. So at the moment, I'm actually broadcasting from Johannesburg. Came especially just to feel part of the vibe. So basically, it's been a very quick and rushed process, sort of getting towards being SA Rugby's dietitian. I was practicing in Johannesburg, and I was approached by a headhunter or a recruitment agent for the opportunity as their dietitian. This was in the same year of the World Cup. And at that time, I hadn't even known that it was for the Springboks. I just thought a rugby team, and I thought it was one of the provincial teams.
Oh, wow.
All the year, actually, it was a dream of mine to be a dietitian that works solely in sport. But it is really a field that in South Africa, we're still emerging, and there's not many teams that believe or understand the role of a dietitian in sport. And so SA Rugby is actually the first national side to have a full-time dietitian. Actually, they're the first sporting team to actually have a full-time dietitian with them. So it's been quite a, I would say, quick journey, because I've been in dietetics for, this will be my 8th year. So a lot of people have worked there really long to get to where I am. I just happen to have the passion, and rugby is one of these sports that's actually my favorite. So I'm so glad to be in a sport that I love and to work in that sport. So
Right.
yeah, so it actually began with a phone call from a recruitment agency.
Oh, wow. And what is dietetics exactly? And what led you to the specific field of sports nutrition?
So dietetics is actually the study of human nutrition. And what I've completed is a Bachelor of Science in Dietetics. And it's a basic undergrad. I've also gone a step further to get a postgraduate diploma in sports nutrition through the International Olympic Committee. But because dietetics is so broad, there's a lot more that dietitians do. So dietitians could work in clinical dietetics, so in hospitals, and you could work in ICU, neonatal ICU, in surgery, in burns wards. And it's mostly to do with therapeutic nutrition. Then you've got community nutrition. So dietetics is so broad that it spans into anything that involves food and better understanding food. And our role is to educate and to assist the general public in understanding that food is not just food. Food actually, for a woman that's pregnant, it helps in their pregnancy. For a child, it assists with their growth and development. For a person that is at risk for chronic diseases of lifestyle, it can assist in preventing that, and we do a lot of preventative work. But in sports specific, my job is to fuel full performance. So I do a lot of performance nutrition, and dietetics will revolve around how do we get or capitalize on the foods that we do have and understand the foods and how to fuel for results. And it's really just knowing that what's best for your body and for that longevity of health. So not just eating whatever there is, but also the mindfulness around eating. And that's why, I mean, you've also got dietitians that work in industry. So they work for companies. So your fast moving consumable goods companies like Unilever and so forth. So they've got dietitians that work as part of their manufacturing process and recipe redevelopment. So it's very broad, but basically sports nutrition is a lot around fueling for performance and fueling for health as well, because we want these athletes to have the best and also reach their potential in terms of their development.
Wow. And what are some significant changes that you've implemented since joining the team that you can actually talk about?
So when I joined, and like I said, sports nutrition in South Africa is not really a big focus. We've really got strength and conditioning coaches that know the basic around it, or you've got trainers that know the basics around food. And then the dietitians who are the specialists in food are not really exposed to sports. So when I joined, it was really getting the players to understand the basics around nutrition, and that is how do they capitalize for their performance, the small changes that make a big difference, getting them to understand what recovery nutrition is, because in athletes, it's not just about eating. So it's also eating to make sure that you can maintain your muscle mass. So that was something that I worked alongside the strength and conditioning coach of that time to really support their goals, and also eating to prevent injury. So that's how we support the physiotherapists. And then also for general health, because you tour quite a lot, you need to make sure that your immunity is supported, that during your travel, you are meeting your daily requirements for energy. So what I played a role in was mostly making sure that the players are fueled optimally. So in Japan, I was really working alongside the chefs with the menus, making sure that what was available to the players were familiar, was also safe for them to consume, and what they would enjoy eating, because food is really enjoyment. And when you tour for as long as players tour and you're together for such a long time, your days seem very long, and those meals are an opportunity to get to know each other, to enjoy what's provided, and to feel satisfied as well. So it's not just about, you know, healthy, and people assume that it's not flavorful and it's not enjoyable. So my job was really to make sure that we were giving the players what they enjoyed and what they preferred, but also it had to meet all these other goals of the different departments.
Wow. And I know you mentioned, you know, just hearing how involved the role is, that as the team dietitian, you're sort of fully working, you know, it's like an all around the year sort of position, right? You're not just engaged at certain times or before a match, but literally 24/7 basically throughout the season.
Yeah, so as the national team dietitian, I only get to see the players face to face just before we get into camp for international season. But throughout the year, because your nutrition really is periodized, and when you're not training, it doesn't mean that you just forget about what's important and just do whatever you want. There's still a way to feel appropriately, because we want to make sure that these players maintain a health standard throughout the year. And when they're not with us and they're playing at their clubs or at the different unions, that they are still supported. And because there are very few unions that have access to a dietitian, because they just don't have them on their staff, my role is to also support the players while they are at a club or at the unions. And even now it's to interact with our international based players, so the guys that are in France and in England, the ones that are in Japan, those teams, to make sure that by the time they come to me, it's not working from ground zero again, so they're continuously supported throughout the year.
Oh, wow. Wow. And you mentioned a bit about
talking to the wives.
Okay. All right. That's a good strategy. I'm sure that's a really effective strategy too.
Well, yeah, because I mean, they're the ones that most of the time, I mean, you do get some players that make their own meals and do their own shopping, but their wives are really the ones that make the decisions around that. And if they don't know any better, they need the support. So that's really why I'm there to assist both the player and their wives or their spouses.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. And you mentioned a little bit about going to Tokyo. I'm wondering what sort of accommodations or adaptations you have to make when you're traveling with the team to another area. And I mean, it sounds like there'd be language, dish considerations, you know.
Yeah, so usually when we do travel abroad and you travel within a team, the rugby union will organize a liaison that speaks both English and their language. And this person is really the support to the team in terms of translation or, you know, accommodating operations. They're the ones that just make sure that there's smooth sailing and alignment between what the team wants and what the hotels and the stadiums and training centers can provide. So the liaison played a huge role in Japan with the language barrier, because I'd have to explain to them what I wanted and he'd have to explain it to the chef. So sometimes it was a trial and error situation, and a lot of the menu or a lot of the items on the menus would be stuff that's closer to home. So I'd get the players to realize that you can eat whatever you would like within your requirements, and it still needs to be something that they look forward to. So things like we try to mimic malva pudding in Japan, because that's something that
Wow.
you enjoy malva pudding. And it's something you don't get over there. So also things like, you know, it's exciting for the players if they get to see or experience dishes that are from South Africa. So biryani, you know, having the players experience that, but teaching the staff in Japan that are not exposed to westernized dishes or even traditional dishes of South African traditional dishes. We tried to mimic a braai setting the one evening, but the weather was totally against us. So we set out, and because Heritage Day happened to also be at the same time that we were in Japan, but also it just didn't work out with the weather and the conditions. But I really, and the staff as well in the different hotels, tried our best to give the players familiar foods. And that's why I'd always tell the hotel staff that, to me, the biggest role players are actually them. So without their support, they, you know, and without their assistance around food, the players wouldn't be fueling appropriately. And poor fueling or inadequate nourishment means that it will affect performance. And this is basically to get the staff to realize that they are so appreciated and to be willing to learn certain recipes and also adaptations to the menus, especially when it was things that they had no clue about. So it was quite an experience, but it was actually so nice that the Japanese are so accommodating. They are absolutely amazing. They tried their utmost best to always make sure it was to our standard.
Oh, wow. That's incredible, Zeenat. That's incredible. It sounds like you wear so many hats, translating the science into the food, to the people. That's really incredible. Yeah, fantastic.
Yes. It is
So now, yeah.
have to as well.
What was that? Sorry, Zeenat.
I said it is a role you have to adapt to. You have to get used to being able to, you know, work with different people and in situations like where language would be a problem, or that you may not find the food that you're used to, and look for an alternative. I mean, in terms of our recovery nutrition, like you say, I have to take the science, and I've done the calculations against what the players would need, and then see how do I now meet those protein, carbs, fats through the food that are available in Japan. Because the advantage that other countries have is perhaps they've got more money than South Africa does. so they could maybe transport their own foods to another country. But it's a logistical issue, and it's costly to do such a thing. So we really have to come up with different ways to change that science and see, and going to stores. And that's why the liaison was so great, because we're going to stores and see what was available in the stores and how do we adapt this to make it work for on or along the pitch for recovery. And that again, the Japanese were incredible. The conditions were so hot and humid in the very beginning, and we didn't have enough blenders, and they actually gifted us with blenders just so that we could make the volume of smoothies, because the fluid was so important, the carbs were so important in those conditions. And when they put the hand over, they were just so happy that we were going to make use of this throughout the entire period.
Wow. Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So I'm taking away, just hearing you speak, the big, food is fuel. And there's always a way, right? Like adapt or die. There's always a way to make something possible. That's fantastic, Zeenat. Thank you. Now let's go from food as fuel to hearing about some food in nature. We have the queen bee herself of raw honey in South Africa, one of the most exciting beekeepers in the country, Mokgadi Mabela. Mokgadi, you don't see many depictions of female beekeepers, and there you are. Tell us a bit about what your journey was to becoming one.
Hi, Lucia, and thank you so much for having me tonight. My journey, I always tell people that it was a complete mistake. Whenever people give me all sorts of accolades, I'm like, guys, I sort of fell into it. So my dad is a beekeeper, and I grew up obviously with him, and he used to do his thing, and we weren't really interested. We were mainly interested in the honey. So when he'd come back from a harvest and there was honey in the house, that's when we thought what he did was good, because we would benefit from it. Apart from that, not really. And I think also the dynamics of him being a father to daughters, we three girls at home. I think from an African philosophy point of view, he probably did not envisage any of his daughters taking over his legacy. So he didn't actively teach us beekeeping. We really actually had a normal childhood. And when I started working, I went to tertiary, I went to corporate, and then people during tea time would be having honey. And I would see that, wait a minute, like, what is going on? And they'd be saying, no, we're having honey with our tea. But I'm like, guys, you are aware that that's not honey, right? They're like, what do you mean? We bought it from the shop. I'm like, that is the problem. Like, at the time, I didn't know what I knew now about honey. What I did know with conviction was that this is very different from what I grew up having, from like what my father would harvest. And it was also, I could also taste the disparity with regards to the flavor and also just the texture. And even though I didn't know what was going on, I knew something was not right about what they were having and calling honey versus what I knew was supposed to be honey. So I offered to bring them some of my dad's honey. And then one person led to the next person. And then it just kind of snowballed into lots of people bringing orders to get this honey. And when, my dad couldn't keep up with the demand, he expanded me to his network of other rural farmers who at the time had no access to formal markets. I bought out all the honey, and that also ran out. And then he's like, girl, I think you need to get yourself a beehive.
Oh, wow.
and probably secure your own supply, so that even in the absence of me not being able to give you honey or anybody else when it's out of season, then you have a bit more of some of the stuff that you made. And that's how I actually got into beekeeping.
Oh, wow. And so just at the top of that, like how does a bee actually make honey?
So bees visit crops and flowers to be able to suck on the nectar that is in the flowers. Sorry, I just need to cough.
Sure. Coughing is allowed.
So they suck on the nectar in flowers and crops. And in the process, while they're doing that, they do something called pollination. When they visit, one part of a flower to the next, they carry around pollen on their legs. This is the stuff that, when you get in the flower, if you touch it, maybe your hand is like, has some
powdery yellow.
Yeah,
Yes.
depending on the color of the flower. And then this is what the bees do to help the pollination, which is, I in simple terms, I can say it's reproduction of, the crops and flowers. They can't reproduce like humans and animals reproduce, so they need help of pollinators like bees and butterflies and wind and all of that. So while they're doing that, visiting flower to flower, they are also helping crops to actually be able to, cross-pollinate and be able to, I don't know, bear more kids if there were people, so in the form of flowers and more crops. And then they take this nectar, they suck it, they've got two stomachs. The one stomach that they suck it in is not the stomach which digests, like the food and stuff. This is the stomach that has enzymes that are going to sort of rework that nectar with the enzymes that the bees have in their stomach, so that by the time they deposit it into the honeycomb, then it is in the form of honey. So then the bee biologically is built to actually turn nectar into honey in the one stomach. Yes. And then they deposit it back into the honeycomb, and then they sort of flap their wings. They don't seal it immediately. They sort of like flap their wings for a couple of days. And when they do this, it's to take out the moisture of the honey. That's why honey can keep so long, and that's why no bacteria can survive in honey. The bees will do that, and they sort of like do what they can to ensure that they take out as much moisture from the honey that they've deposited as possible. And once they're happy with the quality, they close off the honeycomb. That's how we humans know that this honey is ready to be eaten. If you prematurely harvest honey, you might risk the honey having to ferment, because it has more liquid or more moisture in it than it should have. So it can't keep for as long as it should because of the high moisture content in the honey versus what it should have. So that's, in simple terms, how I can explain bees making honey.
Oh, fantastic. And so what is raw honey now? And is raw honey organic?
So organic is a tricky word. So organic simply means in bee terms. So in planting terms, it would mean that, no pesticides and no chemicals were were sprayed onto the crop for it to be, ready for consumption. And with bees, it's very tricky to certify honey organic. The people who I can say have organic honey are people who have the beehive in a place where within 8 to 10 kilometer radius, there is no tampering of human interference, no cars passing by, no gardens, because I don't know what you do in your garden, and a bee will travel 5 to 10 kilometer radius from where they are to make the honey that they make. So you can't certify honey organic because you don't know where the bee goes within that radius. So if there are humans living in there, it's very difficult. So those people who I can refer to as honey hunters, who stay in rural areas where there are like kilometers and kilometers of undeveloped land, and they literally have to walk into the wild to actually harvest honey from trees and mountains. I think those are the ones who can say that, look, we've got organic honey. So now that I've said that, then you can decide if people who say organic honey is organic are talking the truth or not. Raw honey means that you are giving people what the bees made. You have not tampered with it in any way. So you have two kinds of honey. You've got honey that is on the comb, so you literally take it from the nest or the beehive, and then you eat it as it is. It's like a honey cake. Alternatively, you can take that honey cake and you can press it. When you press it, you are going to end up, say you're literally pressing it with your hands like this. What is going to remain in between your hands is what we call wax, beeswax. And whatever is going to squirt through your fingers is going to be raw honey. And then we take that, obviously we do this with machines, and then we put a sieve. So we literally put a sieve underneath my hand. We'll pretend my hand is a machine. And then whatever falls into the sieve, when it comes out, we then take that and bottle it. And that means that we have not altered its natural state as it got from the bees, except that we separated the wax from the honey. So that is the kind of honey that you want to buy or you want to consume, because that is the honey with the most nutritional benefits. That is the honey where you're going to get all the enzymes that you're looking for when you consume honey, so that it can nutritionally benefit you.
Wow.
That is the
so that is what you were tasting. That's what you were remembering tasting in your childhood or when you were at home versus what was being consumed in the office.
Definitely.
Right.
So that is the difference between what we would say raw honey and then what we would say is not raw honey or it's irradiated honey.
Okay. So now for a lot of us, when we think of bees, we think of bee stings and allergic reactions. And there you are, totally comfortable in this environment, harvesting this precious substance. What makes you so at peace with what seems like really terrifying insects?
I think for me, I've never had the opportunity to be scared of bees. So I don't like getting stung. It's not fun, it's painful. But because I grew up in a home where that is what my father did for a living, I've never been abnormally scared of bees. I respect bees more than I am scared of them. So I know that you have to actually take precaution when you work with bees. You have to kit up. You need to make sure that you don't unnecessarily bother the bees, all of that. So I will take precaution, but I'm not scared of bees. And I think it's because I grew up in a house where my father used to interact with bees a lot. And even though we never used to kit up in our bee suits, sometimes we would be in the car when he was doing hive inspections and stuff. And because he's so familiar with them, he would walk around the beehive and stuff. And he understood that if I'm not bothering them, they're not going to sting me. So I've seen many different sides of how bees react depending on what you do to them or how you approach them. So I'm not scared of bees. Right. I don't like getting stung, but I can't say I'm scared of bees. And I think it's how I was naturalized into relating to them.
Right. And also, I think it's also now also an appreciation of the value, which is what I've come to appreciate even more in just hearing about your story. But can you speak about that wider value of why are bees important to us and what is the state of sort of honey in South Africa?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first part, why bees are important. So bees, as I explained earlier, are the insects or animals that are responsible for most of crop pollination. The reason why this is important is because 1 out of 3 spoons of food you eat on a daily basis are because a bee was able to pollinate whatever it is that you are eating. There are other pollinators, but from an agricultural perspective, the most active and efficient pollinator is a honeybee. So that's why food is important. And as I explained, they don't only pollinate the crops that we depend on as humans, but also they pollinate, flowers that herbivores or animals depend on to survive, the shelters that, the lions or the elephants will sit under when they need shade or when they need shelter. It's because of pollinators like bees. So when you have the absence of bees in environmental value chain, it means that the whole food and crop element of nature collapses. That means as humans, we don't have access to fruits, vegetables, seeds, and nuts. And without that, then it means we don't have food. Number one, that's why bees are important for humans, and that's why bees are important for animals as well. Even obviously, you know that spiders, you know, build their stuff on cobwebs, birds nest in trees, and all of that. I could go on and on. And the state of, you know, global the global state of bees is that we are experiencing a bee population decline because obviously we are urbanizing, we are destroying natural vegetation to develop settlements. So we are destroying, you know, habitat that would naturally be, stayed at by bees. And what this then means is that they have little option of where they can stay. They get into your chimney, they get into your roof. And what do? You take out some spray and then you spray them and then you kill them. And that means that we are slowly declining into a smaller and smaller population of bees. Another obviously reason would be climate change. Another reason would be theft and vandalism. So there are a couple of reasons where society does not really understand how to interact with bees, and we are not making the environment any more conducive for bees to be able to thrive and multiply and be at a standard where the ratio of bees versus the development of human and the security of food is aligned. So that is a problem. The bee population, the global bee population decline is a problem. And then the last one you asked about South Africa and honey. In South Africa, we currently consume more honey than we actually produce. So that is problematic because it means that we need to import honey. And when we import honey at the point of entry in South Africa and a lot of other countries, you have to undergo a process called irradiation, which means that you want to destroy any inborn diseases in honey so that you protect your population from inheriting it or getting sick from whatever it is that the honey may contain before it enters the border of South Africa. But the reason why that's problematic, and the reason why I did not understand why the honey tasted the way it did back when I was working and I wanted to introduce people to raw honey, was because that process, although the intentions of doing it are good, it destroys all the enzymes that are precious in honey and that are supposed to make honey what it is. And then you end up with a syrup with no nutritional benefits. And then you are as good as having maple syrup or sugar or any other unnatural alternative to honey. So that is the state of honey in South Africa. We are, I think, the last time I checked, about a year or 2 years ago, we were importing 2/3 of the honey we consume and only making 1/3 in South Africa. Wow. So you know that there is a big problem, especially with all these lifestyle diseases that we have. People are really looking for natural alternatives. Honey is one of them, and not enough raw honey and natural honey is produced as much as people would actually like to consume.
Right. And so on that note, where do people find your honey? Someone's asking in the chat. Of course, we'll put information, but just to verbalize it.
Sorry, I'm just going to intercept you quickly. Somebody just wanted to ask how to become a beekeeper. I think, I'm not sure which part of the world they are, but YouTube is your friend. YouTube is your friend, and also Google areas or Google beekeepers in your area or beekeeping courses, beginner beekeeping lessons. So that you can be able to see if somebody in your area is in a position to help you to start. In the absence of that, or while you're trying to get that, go to YouTube. It's amazing. People find me on all the socials. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. My handles are @NativeNosi, and then on Facebook I am Native Nosi, NATIVE NOSI.
Wonderful.
And also on our website, people can go to nativenosi.co.za.
Awesome. And that's interesting because I know at your emporium, so for people who are for those on the chat who are actually like in the Gauteng area, you do run beekeeping courses, right? 1-day courses.
Yeah, so we do run, I call them master classes. I want them to actually be as fun as possible while getting the most knowledge, and they're not limited to people who only want to become beekeepers. There are people who want to just be responsible towards that interaction with bees, even without necessarily being a beekeeper. So people who want to learn more about bees, people, even corporate days, you know, instead of doing a team building where you go and hang on ropes, you can actually organize, you know, a beekeeping day with us, and we actually host them at our emporium. So you can just go to our website and get our contact details, or hit us up on our socials, or email us at info@nativenosi.co.za, and we should be able to give you the next available dates for our next masterclass.
It's fantastic. The Ankara chef is asking, what does what the bee feeds on determine the flavor of the honey? Or flavored honeys enhanced in some way?
Yes, so there's two answers to that. There is flavored honey. We have infused honey in our shop. So we will take the raw honey that we make and infuse it with a natural element. So for example, we'll have raw honey, and then we will infuse it maybe with dried chilies. And then it will give the honey a flavor that it doesn't naturally have. But to answer your question, honey itself is highly determined by the geographical area, by the diet of the bee, as well as the climate variations in the region. So depending on what your bees ate, your honey will always be different. So that's why when you get honey from a beekeeper, it's not realistic to expect a uniformity. And that's why the retail shelves are a problem, because the honey is always yellow, it's always the same color through, like, from January to December. So people who want raw honey should understand that honey will always taste different. It will be thicker or thinner, it will be sweeter or less sweet, it will be darker or lighter, depending on what the bees fed on to actually make the honey.
And then also you studied international relations to start off with. I'm curious, how has that international relations background influenced your beekeeping in any way?
Yeah, so I wouldn't limit it to just international relations, but I would very much limit it to the corporate world, where I worked in corporate. I think a lot of people are like, you should have just done beekeeping from the start. But I think I've learned invaluable lessons from being in corporate, you know, things like just how, like etiquette, how to speak to people when somebody emails you, when you answer a phone, when you respond on social media, when you write a proposal, when you're writing a letter, when you're putting together a profile, whatever. And also in terms of stakeholder management and relations, how to deal with stakeholders, how to talk to people, how to approach people, how to be professional. You know, I think that experience has helped me so much in actually putting my business together outside of farming, to actually turn it into a business and just understand accountability. You know, you need to pay your taxes, you need to make sure that you've got an accountant to be able to put your books in order, and all of that. I don't think I would have been as comfortable from a business perspective with all those issues if I didn't go through corporate. Not to say that if you don't start working before you open a business, you won't have the skills, but I think they were very critical in you know, helping me to be comfortable in terms of starting my business and being able to build it to what it is today.
Oh, fantastic. And one last question from Tafatso. What is white honey?
So yeah, there is white honey, and white honey is also honey. So for example, it will depend on the flower variation that you have in your country. I know they have a lot of this in Dubai and generally the AUE, because they've got certain flowers that, you know, by the time the honey is harvested, it's pure white. That's the first one. So I know with us, the closest we have to that is aloe honey. Our honey that's made from aloes and kidney beans, it's almost transparent in color. So that would also be white honey. But there is a creamed honey, where you take honey and then, you know, honey crystallizes. Sometimes you get it in your shelf and it's like rock hard and it's become a solid mess. Where you actually control that crystallization process. It's called crystallization, and it's a natural state of honey. You actually control that. So you will take crystallized honey and you will literally beat the honey until the crystals are so smooth that it emulates the texture of cream. And then we call it creamed honey. And that process can also turn the honey to be a lighter color than what it originally is when it's in its liquid form. So to answer your question, it could be any of that. I don't know which one you're referring to, whether it's the natural color of the honey or if you're talking about the creamed honey.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So our next panelist has been cooking in prestigious kitchens from San Francisco to Cape Town and is the founder of Sinesipho Indigenous Food Experiences. To start with, Sine, could you just tell us a bit about your path to becoming a food creative just before your demo?
Hi there. Sorry.
Hi, oh, fantastic. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
All right. Beautiful kitchen. Yeah, we can hear you great.
Thank you. So just how my journey started, I think coming out of school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I was good with numbers, got into accounting, and that's where I realized sort of 3-4 years down the line that it was not something that I wanted to do in the long run. So after a background in cooking at home, from the age of maybe 14, 15, I would make dinner with my siblings. You know, I also got in the habit of watching your Jamie Olivers and Nigellas. It was around the time that the BBC Food Network was coming up. And that's when I really started obsessing and really getting passionate about food. So I was lucky enough to go abroad for a year, and I spent a year cooking on boats, on privately owned yachts. And then off I went to culinary school in San Francisco, and I came back to South Africa. I've spent some time cooking in kitchens, and I've got a bit of accounting experience. And now, while I was doing that, I started up the events at Sinesipho, which is the Indigenous Food Experience.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, and what are you making for us today?
So today, the meal that I'm making is inspired by something that I stumbled across, and something that I noticed on a recent trip to Johannesburg. So I was staying up in the northern area and noticed a lot of the gardens driving around everywhere. There were all these purple flowers, only to, you know, sort of realize that everyone was growing sort of our indigenous or local or wild version of garlic. And
oh, wow.
Yes, absolutely. So it kind of inspired the dish that I'm making for you today, which is a quiche. And inside the sort of filling of the quiche, I've made use of the white garlic, and I've got a little bit of it in a side salad just to show the versatility of the ingredient. And also, while I was doing a little bit of my own research, particularly around the lockdown period, all of us were, you know, sort of steaming with mhlonyana, drinking mhlonyana tea in order to aid ourselves. And that started some of, you know, got me thinking and questioning what other sort of herbs do we have locally that could also have some medicinal benefits. And, you know, I found that wild garlic is one of them.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, take us through.
Okay, all right. So the first thing we're going to do is, just to make sure I've already done this, is to preheat our oven to 200 degrees Celsius. So the filling that we're going to have is going to have some roasted butternut squash. So I've got some butternut that I've cubed over here. We are going to spice it up. In here, we've got some turmeric, and we've got a little bit of cinnamon. That's going to go in there. Some salt, decent sort of couple of pinches of salt, a little bit of black pepper, and I'm just going to drizzle some olive oil toss it around, just so the spices, the salt and the pepper kind of coated in the seasoning. I don't like to wash a lot of dishes afterwards, so just to help me with that, I've lined up a tray with some foil, and I'm just going to throw it in there. So that's going to make for an easy cleanup a little bit later. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop that in the oven. So this is going to roast in the oven for you. It's going to go for maybe about 20 minutes or so. So you just want it to be nice and roasted and golden brown. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take some feta. So it's a bit of a play on a butternut and feta quiche. So I've got some feta that's been cubed over here. This is a local sort of sage. So some of us might be aware of or might use this in our homes as, you know, sort of to cleanse the space.
And what is it called locally, Sine?
So this is called impepo. What we're going to do is we're going to take, I'm using the pepper here just for the aroma of the smoke. And we're going to create a little enclave over here. And essentially, we're going to do a cold smoke of the feta with the pepper. So I'm covering that, literally just making a little smoke contraction, covering it with some foil, and in it goes. All right, so the next step is we're going to make the base of our quiche. So I'm just going to grab a bowl.
Sine, I'm curious what working in different kitchens around the world, literally around the world, has taught you about food.
Oof, I think having had the luxury of cooking, just 1 second, I'm going to just talk you through the beginning of the tart base, and then while I'm working it, I'll answer that question, if that's okay.
Awesome.
Yes. I'm going to start off with about 375 grams of flour, just some normal cake flour. In goes about 15 grams of salt. And I've got some goodness going on in here as well, just to increase sort of the health benefits that you're getting from the base, and a nice way to sort of cheat yourself into eating well and incorporating some goodness into your food. So I'm adding about a tablespoon of kelp powder. In here is about a couple of teaspoons and 1 teaspoon of some poppy seeds. I've got some activated charcoal. So activated charcoal, I know there's been a bit of a craze around it, but it's really good for sort of attaching itself to any toxins that are in the body. So it's a good way to sort of cleanse, and an interesting way to use it outside of, you know, your smoothie or just taking it with some water. Also just, you know, shout out to Chef Dankara from last week, who was speaking about chasing flavor and not recipes. So in here, just to incorporate some flavor, I'm adding about a teaspoon of cumin. This is an interesting sort of ginger mix that I found from a local Cameroonian food market. So it's a combination of ginger and then also some black pepper from Cameroon. I'm going to add about a tablespoon of that in there. So that's just stirring all the dry ingredients together. And in here, I'm also going to incorporate about 50 grams of some grated cheddar cheese. All right. So that starts off your base. And in here, I've got some cubes of some butter, some really cold butter. You want to keep this butter as cold as possible. It's going to make sure that you get a really nice, crisp tart base. I've got 250 grams in there. And then I'm going to work it with my hands. The goal and the thing that I'm looking for is to kind of get it nice and grainy, almost as fine as sand. And this is what I'm going to do with my hands. And then just to answer your question from a little bit earlier while I work the stove, I think for me, cooking abroad taught me that cooking is sort of a universal language. I was lucky enough to spend a year sort of starting and cooking at an Italian restaurant up in San Francisco. And I remember I was in my trial, and the reason that I decided that this was the restaurant that I was going to work in was because they served me tripe. And that it was a tripe dish that was cooked in tomato sauce. It was like slowly braised and finished off in this wood oven with like a nice sort of crispy top. And just a spoonful of that just sent me straight to home. So I think we all have this association of food and dishes to home, and I think that's what connects us with food. And I think that's something that you can say about people's relationship with food worldwide. Just to finish up the tart base, so you can see now I almost have these small little clumps. I've worked the butter through the dough, and then just to bind it in here, I've got 1 egg that I've whisked together with about 4 tablespoons of water. Again, nice and cold. And then I'm going to.
Someone's just asking, Sine, someone's just asking about the name of the restaurant in San Francisco, and they're wishing they'd gone there when you were there.
The name of the restaurant was Delfina. It's down in the Mission District. So it has a little pizzeria right next door to it as well. So you can see my dough is a little bit wet, so I'm just going to adjust it here, add a little bit of flour. So the thing I like about this is I can already smell like that cumin coming forward. I can already smell some of that ginger coming at me as well. And I love the color that I'm getting on this. Okay,
oh,
so
wow.
I'm just going to.
Someone's asking, how do you tell if the dough is too wet? Is that just sticking to your
so
fingers,
if you could have seen earlier, it was kind of really sticking to my hands. And if I just rub it off like that, it's literally forming together by itself. And as I'm working it onto the counter, you can tell that it doesn't have any sort of resistance. So it's literally nice and pliable, if you can feel that, or you can see that, sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right. So this recipe over here allows me to make enough base for 2 tarts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just halve that and keep that to the side. And technically, if I had enough time, what I'd do is I would take this and rest it in the fridge just to allow it to chill for about 20 minutes or so, just to allow it to come together. But just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to continue from here. Okay. Now I want to just slightly flour my surface. A little bit of salt bay action. Okay, and then I want to lightly flour my rolling pin there as well. Okay, my dough goes on. And I remember this from pastry school or my pastry class in culinary school. You want to do what's called sort of walking the dough, right? So I'm just literally just creating these indents, and I'm going to just roll the dough out. So again, just walk it. It just helps you to roll it out more evenly. Every now and again, you want to check, if you can see the bottom there, some of your flour is lifting. So you just want to move the flour around on the surface just to make sure that your dough doesn't stick to your counter. Okay, so I'm going to use this nice sort of rectangular shaped mold over here. So you just want to make sure that you've got a little bit of space on either side of your actual mold. So I'm going to wash my hands a little bit. You can either use some butter, a little bit of cold butter, and followed by some flour, or I'm going to cheat and use some spray and cook. Just to line the sides. Then I'm gently going to lift up my pastry base, gently allow it to fall onto there, and then allow the sides to come in. So there's 2 options over here. You can either leave it like this and blind bake it with a little bit of your edges still around if you want like that perfect crust, and then you can sort of cut it once you've blind baked it, but I'm just going to go ahead and cut it now. So just run your knife along the edge of your tart base like that. Follow it all the way around the side. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're just going to take this tart base and pop it in your fridge just for a period of about 30 minutes, just to allow it to chill in the fridge. What that's going to do is, because we've worked the batter is going to reset, and you really want to start your tart base with a really cold batter. That's going to give you that nice crisp tart base that we all love. That's the best part of a tart, right? So let's just pretend that I've had this in the fridge for 30 minutes, and then just to blind bake it, essentially, I'm just going to poke some holes into the base. The holes, again, is just going to allow, when there's pressure in the oven, it's going to allow that air to escape so that your base doesn't rise. Got a piece of parchment paper that I'm just going to line over the top of it here. And then here you can use some beans or some rice. I've just got some sugar beans over here. And again, that's just going to press that down so that when you are baking this in the oven, your tart base doesn't rise. Okay, so we're going to pop this into a 200-degree oven for about 12 to 15 minutes.
That's a fantastic tip with the beans, because I've read recipes where it said I needed like marbles, and then I thought, oh, I don't have any marbles. I had no baking.
Yes,
baking beans, but I could use like regular beans.
Is I've used these beans over and over and over again. So I just, once I'm done baking, pop them into this container, and they're ready for the next round of baking.
Oh, fantastic.
So this is a nifty little tool over here. It's called a bench scraper. Very nice to very swiftly clean up your counter.
Oh, that's very handy.
See that?
Oh, Sine giving us the tips. Right. Wow.
And then my other little kitchen tip is microfiber cloths as well. They're really great in professional kitchens, especially when you're like a spill that you got to get rid of in 2 seconds before chef finds it.
Wow. Wow.
So I swear by those too. All right, so we're baking our tart. It's currently blind baking. We've got our butternut squash on the go, and now we're going to get started with the other filling. Just so you can see a little bit of that smoke coming through, and you're going to start to see that like change color just a little bit. It's starting to brown. You can see that, especially because when it is nice and moist, really taking on the flavor of that smoke quite nicely. The next step is we're going to fry up some little aromatics just to go on the base. So for anyone who doesn't know what wild garlic looks like, I've harvested a little bit. I've got some growing on my garden. Very careful. Also, I noted that I found these in gardens all over Johannesburg, but you can't just go around harvesting other people's wild garlic. It's very
what are you talking about, Sine? I thought that was the deal here, that we just go and trespass and just uproot.
Please do not go all over Joburg harvesting wild garlic. It's very important, especially for herbs of this nature, that you actually need a permit to be able to harvest them in specific locations. But as I said, I've got this growing in my garden, and you can go to your local nursery. Stark Airs, for instance, has, and you can grow your own. It's quite useful to have in the garlic as well, as it's a repellent for snakes, and it's good to grow in and amongst your crops as well, because it will repel other insects getting to your plants. So that's another wonderful use of this wonderful sort of wild garlic. So as you can see, right there at the base, I'm just going to cut a little bit off of that. The base is quite nice and pungent, and the the flavor kind of gets a little bit more mild as you go up along the stalk. So I like to use this sort of white bush with this really pungent bit for use in stir fries and that kind of thing. And I'm going to reserve some of the green up top for to use in our salad. So I'm just going to do all that up there. So we're going to use that. That's going to go inside our quiche, and I'm just going to keep chopping away. And these little nice, like sort of milder bits up top, almost like you would like a fresh sort of spring onion into a fresh salad. Think of it that way. All right, set that aside, set this aside. And then we're going to head on over to the stove, right? So a couple of things that we're going to go over here. We're just going to start by my trusty little pan. Clearly it's done a lot of time in here. I've got some crushed sort of about a teaspoon worth of coriander. So you start with a cold pan with your spices. What that will do is slowly allow the oils and the aromatics of the spices to release, which makes for better flavor. I've got about a teaspoon of garam masala, about a teaspoon of mixed herbs. This is a really, really lovely product. This is dried crayfish that is used a lot in sort of North African cooking. I discovered it the first time that I made egusi soup from Nigeria. So I can smell some of the aromatics coming out now. So I'm going to just add my oil. Let's call it about a couple of tablespoons of oil in there.
Does the oil matter, Sine?
Sorry?
Does the oil matter? Like what, sorry, the type of oil, sorry.
Oh, the type of oil. So anything, vegetable oil, definitely, I've got a blend of olive oil and other seed oils that I've used.
Okay.
Yeah, so sunflower oil, a blend oil will work nice for you, any of those options. So I'm going to add now one onion that's been finely diced. So the nice thing about cooking onions, or the first thing you want to do once you're sweating some onions, is to make sure that you pop in some salt. First thing that you do, I've got a nice, good, healthy couple of pinches of salt that I've added in there. The reason you do that is that the salt is a dehydrating agent. It's going to slowly allow all the sugars from that from the onion to come out. I'm also going to add our chopped wild garlic in there.
Great. And that was ground crayfish, hey, Sine?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Did you say that was ground crayfish? Yes.
Yes, some dried crayfish. So
Okay.
Crayfish being, it's a fish that's actually from Norway, but it's quite prevalent in, as I said, sort of our North African cooking. What they do is they lay them out on the beach or lay them out to dry rather, and they salt it first. So it's almost like an anchovy, or the Italian equivalent to an anchovy. So that's the nice sort of punch of umami that you get when I incorporate that in my cooking. So I love using it just outside of sort of your Nigerian dishes. So I'm going to leave those onions to sweat. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to make a sort of buku brown batter, right? So this is going to go and coat our butternut. So literally all I'm going to do is take some batter and I'm going to get my heat on. What's going to happen is the batter is going to start melting, and all the milk solids that's in the batter are slowly going to rise and sink to the bottom, and they're slowly going to start caramelizing, which creates this really, really nice, gorgeous, nutty flavor. So on the side of that, while my butter is going, I'm just going to allow these onions to sweat. Adding, I've got about like 3 mushrooms that I've like chopped up there. Gonna saute that for a little bit. Let that go. And then while that butter is melting, I've got some buku here. So buku also a lovely sort of indigenous herb that has this really lovely sweet. I mean, we've had it in gins as well. experience. The Boko gin craze has got up quite a lot over the past few years. So it's very nice. I think it works nice with the butternut as well as the brown butter. And just a nice sort of flavor dimension there. Now, while those are frying, I'm just going to finish this off. Chop in about 1 tomato that I chopped up. All right, and I'm just going to lower that and allow that to gently simmer. Just because the tomatoes are reaching the end of the season, I'm just going to add about half a teaspoon of brown sugar. But next time I make this, I'll try some of native Norse's honey and incorporate that for some sweetness.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, please.
Okay, so as you can see, the butter's like, you can just get in a little closer. All the milk solids are rising up to the top there. Just in a few seconds, you'll see the bottom of the pan start to go brown, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. You can already smell the aroma of the buko in the air. It's absolutely great. You can see the sides start to caramelize. It's almost there. It happens very quickly, so you kind of have to watch this one.
How do you spell that herb that you put in with the butter?
So you can you can smell it like infusing with the butter.
Sorry, Sine, how do you spell it? How do you spell the name?
We're smelling the buko. So we put leaves of buko in the butter. All right. So can you see the browning of the butter? That's exactly what we're looking for right there. So I'm just going to strain that. All right. Okay, at this point, we can remove, so as I said, you would you blind bake your base for 12 to 15 minutes. You would then take off your beans and your parchment paper, allow that to sort of come to the side and put your base right back into the oven. Continue cooking it for another 5 minutes until it's golden brown and set. And then you know you're ready to go with your base. All right. So I've got one top base that I've already finished off over here. And at this point, we're going to assemble our base over here. So right here, we've got our onions, a little mixture that we've got there with our spices and our wild garlic right in the bottom there. So we're just going to smear that all across the base. Okay, next up, you have our butternut squash. That's nice and roasted. We're going to coat that with some of this gorgeous brown butter and get all those nice gooey bits at the bottom. And spread that across. So you got the butternut, the brown butter, the buko flavor, you got some cinnamon going on in there. And then lastly, this is already done. But essentially, you can see now that's taken on some of that smoke flavor. Absolutely gorgeous. It's almost as if you can imagine it smells like fire, you know. So if you can imagine that, like that smoke in your mouth, almost like similar to sage. That's the scent that you get over there. So I'm just going to crumble some of that feta at the bottom, just to make sure that every single little slice gets a piece of feta and has a little bit of butternut. Then I've got about 70 grams of cheddar cheese that I'm just going to sprinkle over the top there. And lastly, All right, over here, I've got 2 whole eggs. In here, there is a mixture of 150 mils of milk, 150 mils of cream. Just going to whisk that all together. Okay, I'm going to season it with some salt. So call that about a teaspoon of salt with about a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. You can use white or ground black pepper or freshly ground pepper, whichever is up to you. This is optional. I've got a little bit of nutmeg that I'm just going to grate over the top there. All right. Just to be on the safe side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that, the baking tray, I'm going to line it with some foil, just to make sure as I'm pouring the egg over, if I get some spilling over, which might happen, I just make sure that it catches there in the foil, and as I said earlier, for an easier cleanup later. So I'm just going to pour this right over.
For those who don't eat fish, what can be used in place of the crayfish, Sine?
So I used a little bit of kelp powder in the base. So that's something that could be used as an alternative. Or, so that would be something that I would use, definitely. Or just some more mushrooms. So mushrooms also have that umami flavor. All right, so it would do the same thing. So in the oven it goes, and I'm going to bake that for 20 to 25 minutes.
Fantastic.
So of course, I already have one that's finished right over here. After 20 to 25 minutes, that's what you get. And I really love like the interesting sort of black color contrasted against the sort of melted cheese that darkens there on top. And I'm just gently going to slice this. And also, if you just look at the side there, all the little goodies going on inside.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So as a serving suggestion, and also just to show another use of the actual garlic itself, what I've done is I've got a little bit of a side salad, just to tie it all in together. All right, so this is just a whole sort of sweet potato that I've roasted. So I'm just going to season that lightly with a bit of salt and pepper. And do a nice drizzle of olive oil. Fried up some lamb chops over there as a nice accompaniment. There you go, you got your quiche over there. And then I've got these wonderful little wild garlic flowers. That's how you can spot all the wild garlic growing all over Bryanston in Joburg. Wow. And I've made a little vinaigrette over here. Some lemon and some mint. So we're just going to toss that.
So the flowers are edible, Sine, of the wild garlic?
Absolutely. Okay. The flowers are edible. The bulb is edible. The bulb as well, just interesting fact, you can in fact boil some of the bulb and it will be good to sort of for ailments such as like cold and flu. And it's a great sort of antioxidant as well. So there we go. So we've got we'll call it our everything quiche featuring wild garlic. We've got some lamb chops, some roasted sweet potato, and a side salad, also utilizing some of the leaves and as well as the wild garlic flower.
Wow, thank you, Sine, for that incredible demo. I wish I was there to be able to taste it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be more questions on standby. But now it's dessert time. So ending things on a very, very sweet note today for us is Davy Tsopo of Keki by Davy. Now, Davy, just quickly, yours is a very unusual story. Oh, sorry, Rita's asking, Sine, just before we move from you, what's the drizzle on the sweet potato?
There I just put some olive oil over the top, seasoned it lightly with salt and pepper.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. So ending on a sweet note for us is Davy from Keki by Davy. So Davy, your story is really unusual because basically if things hadn't changed because of COVID, you wouldn't be here.
Sorry. Yes,
that's okay,
definitely.
Sine, that's okay. Let's see if we can let's see if Davy's still on. Yes, Davy's there. Oh, great, Davy, okay, awesome. So if things hadn't happened with COVID, you wouldn't be in the position you are in with Keki by Davy. What were you doing last February?
Hi guys, how are you?
We're good, thanks, Davy.
Yeah, it's kind of weird story. It's like a miracle. What actually happened last year, February? I was still working. I joined a restaurant called Brian Lara, right in Linden in Johannesburg. So I was a cleaner. You know, I couldn't break through into the kitchen because of politics, kitchen politics, I can say it. So I was a cleaner. I joined Brian Lara, that was in November 2016. I was a cleaner there until February 2020, until March 2020.
Right.
So what actually happened before February 2020, we were blessed with a baby boy, Travis, a naughty one. He's 1 year, 1 month now. So that was the time when the COVID thing coming to South Africa. Then March, 1 month later, restaurant closed because of the lockdown. We were in level 5. So my son was 1 month old and I was retrenched. I had nothing to do, so I was stuck at home. That's end of March and the whole month of April. So, during lockdown last year, it was either a phone, TV, social media, I can say, and TV. So TV was like boring, repeating movies, and so we started checking new channels on DSTV. That's when you discovered Cake Boss on TLC. So I was like curious.
Right. But you actually also got the Wi-Fi password from one of your neighbors, right?
Yes. What actually happened when I lost my job? When I lost my job, I told my neighbor who was staying on 3rd floor. I stay on 4th floor. I've lost my job. We used to meet at the gate like around 11, 12 midnight because he's a doctor. So we used to meet when I used to knock off at around 11, 12, 1. It depends how busy the restaurant is. So we're like connected with Dr. Smith. Then, so when I lost my job, I told him, you know what, I've lost my job because of the pandemic, lockdown. And he was like, no, Dave, you know what, the only thing I can do for you right now is I'm going to give you my Wi-Fi password so that you keep watching funny videos on YouTube and keep your mind busy so that I know it's going to be a tough time for you. And I said, then from there, I started watching TV. Then when I saw Cake Boss cakes, I was like, is this cake real? Then I started checking on YouTube. Then I discovered it's a real cake. From there, I started checking. Then that was in April. We had a brand new stove, because where I stay, we use gas stove, but it doesn't have oven. So we had a brand new stove, and my cousin, she assisted me with money to buy that stove.
Right.
I think she's here. Yeah.
Oh, in the chat. Wonderful.
So that stove wasn't
So then
connected.
you started writing. Yeah, you started writing the recipes.
The recipes, yes. I started writing down the recipes I bought this small counter book then I started writing down the recipes from muffins. I started with scones. It's just that my camera is not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then
and
I moved
where had your interest in baking come from? Were you always interested in baking, or?
To be honest with you, I love cooking. I used to love cooking, but now it's a different story. I love cooking like very much. So baking wasn't my thing. So after watching Cake Boss videos, that's when I developed the love of baking. Then I said, okay, we've got a stove. Let me try it. So by then it was not connected, and we were in level 5, and we were not allowed. No electricians couldn't come to connect the stove. So when we moved to level 4, that was the end of April. That's when
level 4 of
electrician
lockdown.
came. Yes, that's when electrician came. He connected the stove. Then I started practicing what I was going through on YouTube during level 5. Wow. So by then I had theory part, the practical part I didn't know. So I started by muffins, scones, and then biscuits. From there, I started posting on my WhatsApp status and on my Instagram. So one of my friends, Charlotte, she saw my Instagram post. Then she said, you know what, Dave, I can see you are trying something and you lost a job. You've got a newly born baby. I want to support you, but I want something big. Because I was selling those muffins, like I think 60 rand. 60 rand or 50 rand a packet. Yeah. So she said, I want something big. I want to support you. Can you bake a cake for me? Then I said, okay, let me try. Then first cake I ate with my family. It was good cake, chocolate cake. Then the second one I called Charlotte. She paid 250 rand. Imagine you are not employed. We've got a 250 rand. Oh, that 250 rand, like I was so happy. Because by then my wife was on maternity leave. So you were earning half salary. She was earning half salary and I wasn't earning anything. So,
And Charlotte's post is the one that really changed things. She tagged your picture and then
yes,
boom.
She the funny part of it, Charlotte, she doesn't eat cakes. She's diabetic. I've known Charlotte, I think, since 2014. Oh. So the idea was just to expose me to the world. Because I worked with Charlotte before joining a restaurant. We used to work at a battalion doing events. So that's where I met Charlotte. So from that she posted on her Instagram. Then she tagged me. With that one Instagram tag, everything just changed completely because people started following me. People started ordering cakes.
And you went from basically retrenched cleaner in 4 months. Basically, you went from retrenched cleaner to fast forward to June, where Father's Day, you have an 18 cake order.
Yes.
On Father's Day alone.
So between May and June, orders started trickling in. Like every day I could get a cake order. Then June 16, that was Father's Day. It's Youth Day here in South Africa. So I had 18 cakes on that day. And that was the biggest challenge. I was tired. I couldn't sleep for 2 days. I couldn't sleep at all. So from there, I started getting more and more confident. But I was struggling with icing. That was the problem. So one of my friends, Inge, she introduced me to a friend who is in UK, Tanya. Then they taught me how to do proper icing.
The icing.
Yes. So,
and where are your orders coming from? What sort of places have your orders come from to date?
My customers, I'm getting customers from all over the world. Like we're talking of Europe, Asia, America, South Africa, all over the world.
Wow.
Because
people have seen your story and they're ordering cakes.
Exactly.
You have people ordering cakes for family who are in South Africa. to donate to charity. I remember seeing a big order.
Exactly.
What I love about your story is this idea of your network being so powerful, and you've really taken the media by storm. We've been reading your story in the Mail and Guardian and the Sunday Times. It's been really incredible about sort of working with what you have when you have it and leveraging your network to do some amazing things. Yeah. Yes, go ahead, Davy.
So it's like I'm surrounded by lovely people. That's all I can say, because people are sharing my story. Because when I started, that was in May when I started baking, and I started getting. Well, I remember First Lady Megan. She wrote how I started my business, because the support I got is just amazing from neighbors, the community, friends, relatives, and so I was on TV. That was the like first. I was on ETV News. That was in July. Then from there, I started. I was interviewed by News 24. No, not News 24.
Right.
I think it's Mail and Guardian. But
Yeah.
with the help of friends and family, I was introduced to this competition, which was ASA Africa.
Oh, the ASA, yes, ASA.
So like my friend Inge, she said, if there's this competition from ASA, can you check it? Because it's for entrepreneurs who started their business like in lockdown. You can just try it. Then I borrowed my friend's laptop, Charlotte. Then I pitched my business there, and they were impressed with my pitch. And I pitched on Tuesday. It was on Tuesday. Then that following Friday, I won myself 1,000 rand. Imagine.
Oh wow.
I wasn't working.
Yeah.
And I'm now doing my business. I've won 1,000 rand. Business is doing well. Like I'm getting customers each and every day. I'm getting like at one time. At one point I had to do more orders. Like I don't usually take more than 6 cakes per day, but at one time I made 8 cakes single day.
Yeah.
And the challenge,
that's amazing.
Like
that's amazing.
People coming with different ideas. Like, Dave, you know what? I know you're still learning, but please try this. That's how, like, each and every day I get a new challenge. No one taught me. I'm a graduate. I graduated from YouTube, and
and you're killing it. That's amazing. So
no,
what's the plan for the future? Sort of what's your vision for the future?
You know, like owning something like a bakery or a coffee shop with my cakes on display, so that you can walk in, we can have coffee, share my story. You know, that's my mission. Like, honestly speaking,
that's
I have
amazing.
to save as much as I can.
Davy made a cake for Cities on a Plate, Joburg on a Plate edition. I'm going to be posting that to our social media tomorrow. I want to come back just to round up before we do our huge thank you. We've gone over, but it's been so worth it tonight. What's next in your adventure, Sine? And what's next for you, Mokgadi? If Sine is still with us. And Zeenat, if they're still around.
Sorry about that.
No.
For me, the next step is definitely just to do some more research and to find out exactly what it is that our beautiful land has to offer in terms of herbs and produce, and definitely explore more about how we can incorporate it into our food and into our sort of everyday living habits as well.
That's fantastic.
That with you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Mokgadi, what's next for Native Nosi? Or Zeenat, if Zeenat's still there.
Yeah, the next for us, what we currently, focusing on is just collaborations, trying to join forces with people who are on similar paths so that we can empower each other. We already do that with Native Nosi. We try and get entrepreneurs with amazing products who need shelf space and who want to actually display their products. And when she was talking about buchu, those who are in South Africa, we have buchu at the Native Nosi shop. So you can also go onto our website. But this is what we do. We just get, entrepreneurs who are doing amazing products and quality products, and we collaborate with them so that we can be able to empower each other in our spaces. And obviously through those collaborations, there are always new products, new projects that come up that always gives your business a new face. Other than that, obviously growing the footprint of Native Nosi in South Africa, and just trying to create awareness of the importance of bees and the importance of raw honey.
That's fantastic. Zeenat, I know you can't say much, but what's next? Another World Cup win?
Well, let's hope so. But we actually have the
yeah.
British and Irish Lions that has been confirmed to take place in South Africa and not the UK. So we're planning for that, and that's exciting. But also in terms of just dietetics in South Africa and in sport, really I'm trying to support young dietitians in venturing into a field that's still growing and emerging, and supporting other sports so that we can also make our mark internationally. And while learning from other dietitians all over the world, we can also create our own unique South African footprint with our own research, where other people can learn from us as well.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm sure we are all going to be supporting Team South Africa.
Hopefully.
A huge thank you to all four of our panelists today, Zeenat, Mokgadi, Sine, Davy, for the generous gift of your time. A very big thank you also to my A-team behind the scenes, Simeon, Steph, Nana, and Jane. But the biggest thanks goes to all of you out for joining in tonight, especially those frequent flyers who've been with us since Accra on a Plate in July last year. Next month, on April 25th, we're heading to Uganda for Kampala on a Plate. I'm very excited. Be sure to check your email, especially the promotions tab, or if it goes into the spam folder this week, for an exclusive invite to next month. Keep up with us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. See you all on the 25th. Keep safe and take care of yourselves. Thanks for such a fantastic night. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.